The thing I want to begin by saying is I'm a little sick of all the bitching that the fans are doing about the ending of Game of Thrones. Not only is this something that George R.R. Martin would have wanted, but I think it's the best way it actually could have ended, including how George R.R. Martin would end it. Weiss, Benioff, two of the greatest writers of our time, actually. I was at their wedding, and we got drunk on a bunch of Jägermeister shots, and while we were just kind of throwing up in the bathroom parking lot, or one of those two, I don't quite remember, we were talking about the desert scene in Born, some nerd shit, and we wrote all of season 5 in that day, and I think it's pretty great because, you know, season 5 is considered the best season of the show, so I just, I'm in awe of them. I can't, what can I say?
You see, when you do good things for people, and you get what Sansa gives Daenerys in the first episode of the 8th season, it makes sense to burn down an entire city of people. It's called karma.
So we had actually sort of forgotten about the Navy, so we had Dany also forget about the Navy, so that way she could relate not only to the writers, but to the audience. We went to the VFX team, and the VFX team actually said, hey, we can just add fog in the sky, so that way Dany can't see the Navy, and that would make more sense why she would be out in the open. But then the studio said, well, we only have enough in the budget for one of two things. Either we could have fog in the sky, or Jon could pet Ghost. And Weiss and Benioff came in and they said, hey, better idea, we're not gonna do any of that.
Bran was totally the most likable character in the show, and to emphasize that fact, we had him sit around and do literally nothing to help anybody.
Weiss and Benioff may be some of the sexiest, smartest people I know.
If any of these things that happened to Dany in any different way, she wouldn't have turned out the way she did, which is why we had to force them all together in 5 episodes.
You know, I don't think people understand how hard writers have it. I mean, like the stunt guys and the actors, you know, they got it easy. Like coming up with new ones to put in like a sentence, that's like putting like nails to the chalkboard, you know? It's fucking stupid. And when we were writing about how Jon was gonna tell Arya and Sansa about, you know, he was a Targaryen, we were like, what do we do? And then, you know, D&D was just like, hey, you know, man, let's just cut it. And I was like, dude, there we go. And I could like sleep easy that night.
Many of these grievances that Dany took issue with were very unreasonable things to be mad about. Like Jon riding north and her losing her dragon to defend him, and the North still not following her is a very unreasonable thing to be upset about. Another dumb thing is her wanting to burn down the Red Keep before anybody was in it. That's unreasonable. Her wanting to burn the Iron Fleet before it became a threat, and then not doing it because her advisors told her not to, and you know, it becoming a threat. That's a petty thing to be upset about. All these things are very petty.
The concept of Arya killing the Night King actually works very well within her character arc. And as we all know, if something works well in concept, the execution of it doesn't matter.
See, what people don't get is that D.B. Weiss, he actually foreshadowed this last week inside the episode.
One thing everybody who comes into contact with this information seems to understand is how incendiary the information is.
This proves that if you don't like what's going on, you just haven't been paying attention.
In season 1, it's actually Cersei that says,
when you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die.
And this actually foreshadows the fact that Cersei dies.
I can only assume that there are so many mentions of the Bells because D&D are secretly big Edgar Allan Poe fans.
Weiss and Benioff actually said that they think that Varys knew he was going to die when he originally decided to betray Dany. And when they told me that, I said, what do you mean you think? You either know or you don't know. And even if you're trying to be vague about it, I mean, you should know about what your character motivation is so it makes sense. And then Weiss looked at me and he actually slapped me in the face and said that was my first warning. So I never did anything again.
So the guys come up to me and they give me the script for the part with Dorne in it, which is great in the books, by the way, and I read it and it's just terrible. And I'm like, have y'all been drinking when you wrote this or something? And they were like, yeah. And I said, you can't write like this while you're drunk. And Benioff looks at me and says, why not? That's the way I wrote Wolverine.
The show ends with Bran as king. And while it looks like things are getting back to order, the show is actually giving signs that it could be getting worse. Is Bran going to be a good king or a bad king? We don't know because we didn't set it up. The small council will choose their king from now on, but does that mean things are going to be less corrupt or just as corrupt as before? 3 people on that council are all representative of the same family. Do they all represent House Stark? Arya has essentially left to go west. We don't know where the fuck she is. So is her spot going to be fulfilled by somebody else, or does Arya have to come back? Do all of these people have to come back? Some of them are old. When they die, who replaces them? So the question begs, was this actually a good decision at all? Or was this a poorly thought out one that everyone seemed to agree with because Tyrion was seen as the intelligent one of the group? Unfortunately, when I asked DB and Weiss this, they said, we don't give a shit. And they kind of pushed me out of the room because they were writing on some script called Stir Words or something like that. And so I asked George R.R. Martin about it, and he said, well, you're going to have to wait till the books come out. And I was like, okay, well, you're going to die in 2 years, you fat fuck, so just tell me how it ends. And then he hung up for some reason, and I didn't know why. But, are we done?